Season 1, Episode 2 of Bobby's let's see, how does it go? Bobby's video, Long Goodbye, entitled Gwen Part 2, is brought to you by Design Within Reach. Locations in Santa Monica, West Hollywood, and Oxnard. Kind enough to provide our patio furniture. And I guess most of what's in the living room, right? Except for the couch?
Correct.
Except for the sofa? Did we determine what the difference was between a sofa and a couch? A sofa can be a sleeper, right? But I don't know that a couch. Never mind. We thank Design Within Reach for accepting Marcia's money for this stuff, because I call it Design Within Marcia's Reach. Design Within Reach is, by the way, was the star of our riots. I don't know whether you were able to partake on television of any of our Santa Monica urban unrest, which resulted in the destruction of an REI store at Santa Monica Boulevard and 4th Street. But across from that was Design Within Reach. Kind of, just looking around and twiddling its thumbs and thinking, oh, if we just stay really still, maybe they won't see us. The urban urchins. I think they saw them, but I think they looked in the mirror. They pressed their noses to the mirror like members of the Little Rascals and decided that none of that stuff could be fit in their hefty bags, while the getaway cars headed in from surrounding counties. There was the one thing that would have fit in one of their hefty bags was the chessboard, the chess set, right? Man Ray designed it, retail for about $700. I don't know what that would have gone for. I don't know what the the markup is on the black market, pardon the pun, for a Man Ray designed chessboard. Most of the people who were shopping that day at that corner weren't wearing shirts, so I doubt seriously that they're much into Man Ray or into chess. But again, thanks to Design Within Reach. We'll try to have a sponsor every week. To my left is a ledge that I promise you the story of which, and this happened several weeks ago, does contain a Gwen segue to anecdotes about her life to wrap up my remembrance of her. And we had originally planned to tape over there. We tested the light from an overcast morning yesterday and then had to call an audible on a sunny day today, so this is our vantage point. But to my left is a ledge that several weeks ago I looked from the living room and I sensed that all hell was breaking loose for some reason, and I brought Marcia over. Do you recall how this went down? How you explained to me what was happening, or do you remember any of that?
Is this the Morning Dove episode?
Yes.
Yeah, the avian boudoir.
Exactly. I said, because all I saw was feathers for the longest time. And I called her in and I said, look out there, is that what I think it is? And she said, what do you think it is? I'm cleaning this up. Let's pretend that I said avian coitus, which, by the way, I never knew existed until that day. I mean, I have amassed an amazing amount of knowledge. Some to be used personally, some to be used professionally. But there are these little intellectual poverty pockets, these little pustules of ignorance throughout my life that I bump into, and I bumped into one that day. Apparently, male birds, do have penises, and they use them in the breeding process, and they find willing accomplices toward that goal, and that's what was happening out on that ledge. He was, I assume you were co-voyeur with me on that day, right? You also viewed this activity out in front of God and everybody. They wouldn't even carry this into the bushes and conduct it with any dignity at all. His feathers came up as if to obscure from the paparazzi what was happening, right? Looking over both shoulders. What are you looking at? That kind of thing. Other birds from other yards. Hey, get a room. And of course, she's just, sitting there, I guess, doing what you do. when you find yourself in a situation like that. But that was a real game changer for me to find out that after decades of looking up at birds flying over me and not seeing anything, on that order, that there are actually genitalia for, and for that matter, for female birds that help to result in the breeding process. I'm guessing that you were very young when this occurred to you, but boy, I'm a little late to the game, and I apologize. But that was quite an education, I must say. And, I'm just wondering how time passes for birds. Let's say this lasted 20 seconds or 30 seconds. Was that like a marathon in the bird world? Was that, I feel sorry for them that they're unable to enjoy, the oral and digital preliminary energy savers that expedite matters in the human kingdom. But because it was over, in I'm going to say 20, 30 seconds of furious flurry of activity. But and we know that dogs, just to give you an example, a year of our life is, how does it go? 7 years to 1 year. I forget how that goes. So I'm wondering how time passes for birds. Was there ever a point in the recipients of those moments for her when she said, "Man, I wish you'd wrap this up. I have things to do." Here's how this translates, segues into this remembrance of my mother, part 2 after her passing on July 11th, 7/11, if you'll recall. So I'm watching this and I'm thinking, is he the coxman of the neighborhood? Is she the so-called hot pants woman? And I flashed back on the time that I brought to my parents, like an idiot, the news my sophomore year in college of the first of my pregnancy scares. I've not shared this. I've saved this moment to share this anecdote with you. You don't know this about me. But something Gwen said, and I think she would have been, this was 1970, so she would have been 38 at the time. And while both of them were haranguing me over my role in, what I was just kind of generally informing them about, she said something that has stuck with me to this very day, and it's this line. She said, "Ain't nothing worse than a hot pants woman." And that has stayed with me, and well, to the degree that I have come up with a list, an unofficial list, of many things that are worse than a hot pants woman. And I've also come up in recent entertainments that we've been exposed to on TV, where other people use that line. For instance, Don Corleone. My son Santino, rest in peace, would tell me, ain't nothing worse than a hot pants woman. Or, any of the people that I imitate. It just sounds funny coming out of their mouths. Didn't sound funny coming out of Gwen's that day. She was famous for one-liners like that. Well, you remember last week when I told you about the "Ain't None of Us Gonna Go Down in History" bit. In Texas, parent to child, many times wisdom is imparted beginning with the word ain't. Not a lot of wisdom, not a lot of grammar do you get at that age. The more I think about it, the more I ponder my life with those people and all that's come after, I'm really amazed that I'm as coherent as I am now. And I know you are too. But that is what she said. And then in the next decade, if I have my chronology right, the 80s, Bruce Springsteen was huge. And she was talking to me, the first of our Sunday conversations when I lived in another state, about Bruce Springsteen. And there was this lull, there was this pause in the conversation. And she says, "Why do they call him the boss?" And I said, "Mom, I'm stuck. You've asked me a question that, one of Art Linkletter's children might ask him. You kind of get stuck for an answer." And I just, why do they call Frank Sinatra chairman of the board at that time, or old blue eyes, or in Japan, old round eyes. Why would they do that? Celebrities attract these monikers. They can do nothing about them. She also said something to me after I came home. I was forced to come home from Iceland after a visit with my middle child who was going to school there for a year. I was sent back with a horrible case of facial cellulitis. My face looked worse then than it does now. And the doctor, who was from India, this is an HMO in Maplewood, Minnesota, he's typing and he says, "You're type 2 diabetic, you know." And I did not know, and I've had to adjust some of my behaviors, many of them, ever since. But I told Mother about this, I guess you would call it a stroke of good fortune, that this would be discovered via facial cellulitis contracted in Iceland. And she said, and this is again during one of our many Sunday phone conversations, she said, "That's Jesus looking out for you." So, another bit of wisdom that has stuck with me for many years. Did you ever get little aphorisms or little words to live by from your mom down through the years on 2 continents? Because, I think in many ways they form us.
I don't remember anything coming from her so much as my grandfather. He used to counsel me when I was deliberating about something. When in doubt, don't.
This is her father?
Correct.
Okay. Your maternal grandfather. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice segue to another big event in Gwen's life and in that of our entire family was the death of her mother, my maternal grandmother, in the mid-70s when Gwen was in her early 40s, at the hands of a drunk driver. And I have been racking my brain this morning before the taping to try to remember whether she called me with the news. I have to believe she was so beside herself she couldn't, but that somebody did. And we all collected at my grandfather's house, her husband's, my mother's father, and there were 2 layers of grief there. There was grief over what had happened that day that none of us were privy to, that we had to find out, second and third hand. And then there was the grief around that for me because, once again, just as I had never known birds to copulate, I had never known women to die. I kind of had it in the back of my head that maybe women get cut some slack along those lines, that maybe they don't die. I was taken to way too many funerals. That's probably what was one of the first traumatic aspects of my upbringing. But they were all really old men or middle-aged men or boys. They were all men. And maybe I had just added in my head that women can't die. It was weird to see my grandmother in that open coffin because it was the first woman's funeral I'd ever been to. So there was the larger grief around the more specific grief having to do with her passing. She was in her 60s and had led an exemplary life. And again, she deserved better, just like my own parents deserved better at the ends of theirs. And this was in the era before being anti-drunk driving was cool, before MAD, M-A-D-D. What is the thing that's hanging down at the top of the screen?
Calendar reminder. It won't be on the taping.
Okay. Well, what is the calendar reminding you of?
Knitting today with Denise.
Okay, knitting today with Denise at 11 o'clock. Denise Peak here in Malibu is the mother of the former mayor of Malibu. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And they knit together a couple of times a week. And so we're getting a reminder, which you don't see, but is tremendously distracting to an easily distracted person like me as we continue the taping. Being exposed to that kind of extreme grief when there's never been any excuse for that in, let's say, in the previous 25 years of my life to that point, was a real eye-opener. You don't expect people to behave that way. I'd seen some weird behavior at some of these funerals out in the country I was taken to when I was a child. And I don't know why I was taken to them. I assumed there was some sort of babysitter strike going. And I had to accompany my parents to these little ramshackle country funerals where the guest of honor was 95, but everyone was acting like, he was 12 and that this was, cause for great wailing and gnashing of teeth. But these people were going nuts and asking stupid questions of my grandfather about the driver, such as, is he black? As if that would make a hell of a lot of difference. This, once again, should give you some insight into my upbringing. Being on hand for extreme grief of others is like, pardon the indelicate analogy, but is like being on hand for extreme pleasure, for the plateau phases of arousal of another person. They are another person. You've never seen, at least the first time around, you've never seen them in that condition and that out-of-body kind of experience. And, it's a little, it's kind of a stark sort of awakening. So I was glad to see everyone recover eventually, but man, by eventually, I mean capital E. I remember, let's see, this happened in October of 74, 75. Christmas was just a grinder. People trying to get together at Christmas and celebrate and, be festive and stuff, knowing that my grandmother wasn't there for the first time in 60-something years. And the least little thing would set them off. Somebody would say a word that would remind them of her, and then everyone would just go to pieces. And we hear about this kind of behavior at graveside services for certain ethnic groups where literally they will try to get down into the grave with the person. This was the closest for white Protestants I'd ever seen to that kind of behavior. So that kind of thing will stick with you. And as a result, for some reason, Mother became the archivist of the family. Throughout our house, out came the pictures I'd never seen before of, what's it called, ancestors, forebears, whatever the right term is, but not black and white, but more like brown and white, almost like rotogravure. They were so old, of these grim Dust Bowl expressions of her relatives in these Hoovervilles, people who were, in the 1930s, Stockholm Syndrome type grip of Herbert Hoover's Republican Party. They didn't seem to mind how much the national government beat them up, and were kind of ambivalent, it seems in retrospect, to the measures FDR was trying to undertake to give them some relief, just so the Republican Party kept the racism flowing. They were just fine with it, but their expressions were not happy ones. So if you can imagine this, around the house, even in the restroom, even in the bathroom, there were pictures, framed pictures of her relatives. She'd become the kind of family historian and archivist and collector, and this lasted, I'm going to say, probably a year or two. I mean, this was really traumatic for her and for the family. I don't know for a fact that she and her mother were really close. I think overall, both sides of the family I grew up with were not really close. We were into distancing well before COVID. We were all concentrated in the same general metro area, but rarely visited except for the occasional birthday or maybe Thanksgiving, Easter, Christmas, that kind of thing, religious high holy day type stuff. So I think that was one major event in Gwen's life. And I'll get to the other now, because I'm determined to keep these things under 30 minutes a week. I don't want to waste any more of your time than we have to. But in 2008, 12 years ago, I believe my sister Kim, our middle child, the oldest of my two sisters, has estimated that Mother was 75 or 76 at the time. To give you some idea about how human beings created or born in the 1930s were made to last, like Detroit made cars back when Detroit really cared. She was physically really resilient, and here's a good example. At the age of 76, Gwen Yates, in one of the more obvious cases of construction defects not litigated in the history of the state of Texas, fell through an attic floor, which happened to be the ceiling for a garage. She fell while looking for Christmas ornaments in an attic, or I guess it would be the attic, and fell through, I don't know how many feet, through it to the cement floor below and broke basically every bone in her body. Rushed to the hospital on the same day that her first great-grandchild was being born at the same facility. And Kim tells me about rolling her, keep in mind, every bone practically in her body, in her brittle 76-year-old body, broken from this fall from the attic onto the cement garage floor. And she's being rolled into a delivery, or what do you call them with the incubators? The
Nursery?
Nursery. Very good. Thank you. This is like Penn and Teller. Have you noticed? I'm the one who does all the talking, and then the real magician sits here with the words to help the doddering fool narrator. And she was rolled in to meet her first great-grandchild on the day that she almost lost her life. I thought that was big. That's the kind of thing that I can't write, that I really envy whoever's in charge up there for orchestrating here on the ground. Because that's a fantastic story of, I don't know, what, Hakuna Matata, of life going on, or the things succeeding, generations succeeding the other, or something. I don't know. I don't know how heavily I should read into it, but I thought that was an amazing story, and it was good to get back in touch with that, and kind of good to get back in touch with what happened in the mid-70s with the death of her own mother. Everybody else's passing was kind of, I don't mean to be cavalier about this, but ho-hum. My late grandmother's husband, maternal grandfather, passed away in the waiting room of his doctor's office. And then I think we had heart attacks for both of my father's parents. So it was, the expected kind of instances of mortality as opposed to some of the flashier that you see these days. I continue to marvel at how I could have gotten it into my head, A, that birds don't have sex, and B, that women don't die. Because I've been in, monitoring headlines, especially from the entertainment world, since I was a little kid. Since when there were both morning and evening editions of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And I would stand out there waiting for the newspaper, waiting for the kid to throw it, and I would, crap my pants. I wasn't leaving my post, so I remember seeing stories about Marilyn Monroe dying in 1962. It was the first time I'd ever seen the expression nude body. Now, there's a game changer for an 11-year-old. I'm thinking, why would she take off all her clothes before she died? Kids. What do you... Inger Stevens, another beautiful actress, suicide. A lot of women, in the news died between the time I was born and the time my grandmother died, and I noticed it because I read stories about it, and yet in my head somehow it looked so weird to see my grandmother in that coffin when everyone I had seen up to that point was some form of American male. Oh well, this is why this is free therapy. This is good free therapy for me. And it's sponsored by Design Within Reach. Design Within Marcia's Reach. Do you have anything to add to this? You know what? You got to meet her. What now? What would that be? 7 months before she died. Mm-hmm. We went to lunch at a big carbs hangout in Texas, where they brought out family-style platters of meat and chicken. I mean, roughage was not the strong suit of this particular restaurant, called Babes in North Richland Hills, Texas. And what were your impressions of her as you got to know her and chatted with her? Was she cranky that day? Because many people of that vintage are. Do you recall any exchanges with her?
I remember walking into her elegant home and seeing that she was watching HGTV,
Mm-hmm.
which she muted when we arrived. And then over the course of our conversation before we went out to lunch at Dave's, she got text messages and phone calls from people, and I thought, wow, this woman is really with it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a lot of 80-somethings who have familiarity or comfort with iPhones or
Tech,
Android phones.
yeah.
And
Oh, she was a texting fool when texting was first available. She was just a texting madwoman, and I'm going, wow, what happened here? I didn't even own a phone. The only reason I got a phone was in order to get the call. Because, you know, my parents were nearing the age where they were going to be in ill health and someone would need to call me, and I would need to come to Texas. And now I don't know what to do with the phone now that my parents are gone. What do I do with it? You people need a phone so you can find out about my passing. So were your impressions of her generally positive?
yes, she was very independent.
Yep.
She kept a lovely house.
Yep.
She was
Real white glove. I think my youngest sister Lori may get that from her. Where you go into a restroom, go into a bathroom, and the hand towels are perfectly aligned on the rack. I mean, one is no longer than the other. Everything's nice and even and tidy. I think she may get that from Gwen. Gwen had an unerring sense of order in the way she arranged her rooms. My father could have had nothing to do with that, any more than I have anything to do with the arrangement of our decor. I just think chicks have a way about them. They have that, you know, sixth sense, not to stereotype, but I can easily stereotype myself as someone who has absolutely no ability in that department. I remember she was very proud of this new chair that she had. It was a vibrating chair. I think it was the only time I ever heard my mother say the word vibrator. And I was glad for her that helped her relax. Because she had, in addition to the Parkinson's, I think that was aggravated by just a general nervous condition, which she got from her mother. Neither her mother nor her father were people who relaxed easily. It seemed like they were constantly on edge. He was an independent businessman, ran his own dry cleaners. And frugal? What do you mean spend a nickel on a movie in 1938? Never went to a movie. And we told funny stories years later about she would go through a room to begin the day by turning on lights, and he would be right behind her turning the lights off because he wanted to save on utilities. He's an extremely frugal person. And again, a creature of the 20s and 30s, my own father burying coins in the backyard because they were afraid of the banks because things were so mishandled by Herbert Hoover and his market forces minions of the late 20s, early 30s, which we're unfortunately getting a taste of today. But that's a whole nother show. Incidentally, next week, as you can tell by my COVID haircut, we're going to be discussing COVID next week on episode 3, so don't miss that. Hope you folks who found this by virtue of our mutual friend Jackie Hesse's Facebook page, or as posted on LinkedIn, are getting a kick out of it at your convenience. What's really cool about this mode of communication is that it's like anything else, a virtual cinema, what have you. You can partake of it in bits and starts, you know. Fits and starts, I think is how it goes. We should call this presentation Fits and Starts. I'll be fits and you be starts. And so you can organize the viewing of it, if you so choose, all in one gulp or incrementally throughout the day, throughout the week. But I guarantee you, half hour is more time, somebody's time that I want to waste with these weekly things. And we owe it all to Gwen. The idea of remembering her in this way. So glad she was my mom, and I hope that she senses this as she gets settled into her resting place for week 2 or 3, or I don't know. When it comes to stuff like that, I kind of lose my grip on it. But She and my dad are side by side in a cemetery in Fort Worth, Texas. And so I think about them every day. Miss them very much. Got to run. The button pusher here will do her bit, and we'll see you next week.